Hi guys, Chris here from Ordealist. I recently put a lift on my Jeep, my Rubicon Unlimited 2015. I chose the Metal Cloak Game Changer 3.5 lift. I had heard really good things about the lift, and 3.5 inches seemed like a good height for me, given what I do, which is a mix of overlanding and off-roading. I live in Southern California and San Diego, and we have a lot of technical off-road trails, you know, within an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours drive. So I like to do that, so I want a capable vehicle that has enough clearance, enough articulation, big enough tires to do some of the trails around here. But I also like going out in the desert and overlanding and going up to the mountains, you know, going into the Sierras, going into Anza Borrego Desert, the mountains here in San Diego, camping. So I don't want something that I can't drive on the highway for a good stretch, you know, comfortably. So this seemed like a good middle ground. The 3.5 inch lift lets me put 35-inch tires on the Jeep without having to, well, 35-inch tires, basically you don't have to make a huge amount of modifications to the vehicle to get them on the Jeep. Really the lift is about it. If I went up to like 38-inch tires, that's a whole other ball game, because the torque created by the tires is so much, it really puts a strain on the engine. So people tend to re-gear when they do that, re-gear the differentials. You have to often get a new drive shaft that's a different length. You have to reinforce the C-gussets on the axles, because that's a weak point on Jeeps, on JKs anyway, because you're just putting more torque with those bigger, heavier wheels. So I'm not ready to do that. I don't have the budget. I don't really have the desire right now. I may down the road. So the 3.5 inch Game Changer gives me flexibility to do that, which was another reason I got it. If I got the 2.5 inch, I think that might have been a stretch from my understanding if I wanted to go bigger tires, but the 3.5 inch definitely will fit a 38-inch tire, or maybe even bigger down the road. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of putting it on, and at the end I'll talk about how it went. Flies here. I'll talk about how it went, and you know, my experience, and I hope it helps you kind of make decisions on putting a lift on. You know, if you want to get a Game Changer or a Metal Cloak lift, what that's like, maybe some of the things you can avoid, the mistakes I made that you know, I could have avoided had I had more experience putting lifts on. There are several reasons to put a lift on a Jeep or any other vehicle going off-road. The primary reason is to create more room between the body and the axles, so you can put larger tires on the vehicle. The larger tires create more clearance for the axles, in particular the axle differentials, which are the low point typically. Along with the larger suspension springs, the bigger tires also lift the vehicle's frame and other parts of the undercarriage, so you can clear obstacles such as rock, mud, sand, and snow. The large suspension also provides cushion and articulation when driving over rough terrain, which makes the ride more comfortable and provides better traction performance. Metal Cloak has a great reputation, and the Game Changer lifts came highly recommended. The kit I chose came with control arms, coils, shocks, track bars, a rear track bar bracket, adjustable bump stops, extended brake lines, and sway bar links. Alright, I'm on day 2, sort of day 3. First day I really just got it up on the stands and the tires off. Everything's gone pretty well. I got the brake lines in, new brake lines in, old brake lines off. Took off the control arms and the shocks and the old springs, and so now I'm to the point of putting on the new just put on the top front control arm, got the new brake lines in, and so now I'm moving on to the lower front control arm. Everything was pretty easy. The only issue I ran into was the getting the control arm bolts off was a little tricky. Partly because I didn't really understand the bolts at first. They have a little locking flange that on the upper control arms on the inside near the body. There's a flange that catches and lets you unscrew it, but I didn't realize it was a flange. I thought it was like some sort of weird washer that wasn't attached to the nut, so I kept trying to get the nut off, and so essentially what I was doing was yanking on a nut that could not go anywhere because it had a piece of metal sticking off and was locking to the frame. So that took a little while, and then just getting enough force to get them off. I guess their control arms are notorious for being, the nuts are notorious for being hard to get off, but I finally just had to like get up under it pretty well and get a good leverage and like hang off some of the bolts and pull them down. So, you know, it was really just a matter of getting the right angle and getting some leverage. And I also sprayed them with, just fell down, some of this PP Blaster, let it soak overnight. So that I think really helped. Maybe it was just my angle, but they did finally come off. Okay, so I finished the front end, I think. All the pieces are on. What is in there? Oh, there's a ton of stuff. The shocks, the springs, the control arms, new track bar, new sway bar links, outboard shock mounts for the shocks to bring them out a little bit, new brake lines. So that took me, I'd say that probably took me a good 15 hours. Here, I'll show you around the front end before I put the tires back on. After finishing the front end, I moved on to the rear end. The process is fairly similar on the back end and went a little bit quicker. I did make the mistake of putting on the coil springs upside down the first time I tried. It's been about a month and a half since I put the lift on. I did it, I'd say, in about 4.5, 5 days. That's me not having much experience putting lifts on, doing it in my garage with jack stands and a floor jack to lift the axle up and down while I'm working on it. I would imagine someone who'd done a lift, even one lift before, could do it in 3 or 4 days. Pros probably do it in a day, day and a half, 2 days. I did make some mistakes along the way. One was, probably the biggest one, was I didn't adjust the control arm length. And the control arms, the front and the upper and lower control arms control the geometry of the front end of the Jeep. And so what happens is if you don't get it right, then your geometry is strange. The drive shaft angle that comes into the differential is off. It just messes up your caster, how your wheels sort of sit in relation to your steering. Luckily, I was able to take it to a shop and get them to do it. You're supposed to do an alignment, get a professional alignment at the end anyway. And I just took it in. I didn't realize I'd done it. I hadn't made them long enough till the very end of the process, and that was because there was a chart at the beginning of the instructions that gave all the control arm lengths, but I saw it and then I forgot about it by the time I got to that step, and there was no explicit step that said, hey, make them this length right then. So I realized once I kind of got further down the road and that I'd done that. It's a pain to put them on and off, honestly. That's, you have to do a lot of work to undo them. So I just took it to the alignment shop and said, look, here's what I did. Can you guys fix it? And they said, yeah, we can do it. Still, the guys at the sales counter said that. The mechanic, once he realized, was like, oh, that's a lot of work. So I think it probably took him an extra hour and a half, 2 hours to adjust the control arms. I did give him a big tip at the end to make it right, and he was appreciative. Another mistake I made was putting the rear coil springs in upside down the first time around. It was easy to fix, you just flip them over, although getting the coil springs in can be tricky, especially when you're doing it at home, because you need to droop the axles pretty far to slide the springs in. One big decision I had to make when putting the lift on was what to do about the wheels and the tires. The Game Changer lift calls for having a minimum of 4.5 inches of backspacing on your wheels. And what backspacing is basically, if this is the axle and that's the center of the car, it's how far out on the axle the wheel will end up sitting. The tire will sit. And the wheel will sit. On my stock JK wheels, it would sit inside further like this, but with a 4.5 inch back spacing, it would sit further out on the axle. And that just gives the wheel more room to move, articulate when you're off-road. The lift is allowing the wheel to articulate a lot further. So you need just more room, and you need the wheel a little bit further out to widen the stance of the vehicle. There were 2 ways to accomplish that. One was to keep my old wheels and buy spacers, which would push them further out on the axle. The other was to buy new wheels that were already had back spacing to the specs I was looking for. I ended up buying a new wheel. I just decided that why waste money on a spacer when later on I'm going to want to probably get a proper wheel that has proper back spacing anyway. So I just decided to bite the bullet and get the wheels. You can see them here. They're Pro Comps, and I've got the 35-inch BF Goodrich KO2 tires on the Jeep. Since I put on the lift, I've gotten out on the trails a few times. Took it to the desert one time, up in the mountains another. I'm really happy with how the lift performs. The articulation's really good. The comfort when you're riding over just kind of like washboards and other just general rough roads is nice for long hauls. I don't really have any complaints so far. I tightened it up after the first trail ride, got underneath and tightened some of the bolts, and everything seemed to be fine. So far so good. I'm really happy I put it on, and I'm really enjoying it.